We must understand that it is absurd that there are school districts throughout this country where there are major shortages of teachers. And if we understand the enormously important work that teachers do, that means, in my view, among many other things, that we should be paying public school teachers a minimum of at least $60,000 a year. And I am proud to tell you that I will soon be introducing legislation to do just that.
And I hope that you were paying attention to the word minimum that he used. Like, that is the floor, it's not the ceiling. And I've heard the senator give this particular speech ad nauseum on the campaign trail, both in 2016 and also in 2020. And teachers are underpaid. It is not a myth. Let's take a look at this graphic. The decline in average teacher pay. Teachers make on average $2,150 less than they did 10 years ago, adjusted for inflation. So what kind of country, what kind of nation are we that we would allow teacher pay to go down? The way that teachers have to be credentialed in this country, they're up there with all the other professions of lawyers and doctors. And I would argue that they are, in some cases, more important, because who helps, keyword is on helps, to mold the minds of the lawyers and the doctors is teachers. So why wouldn't we give teachers the respect that they deserve through their paycheck? Hello, somebody? I want the teachers watching today to go ahead and send us a message. Let us know how you feel about that. If anybody's ever had a teacher who made a difference in your life, shout them out. They mold the minds of the future generation. So why in the heaven would we pay them less than we pay a doctor or a lawyer? Makes no sense to me. They right up there with them folks. Everybody has a role to play. And teachers, most teachers, not all, but most teachers play that role extraordinarily well. So during the campaign, the senator gave this speech over and over again as we traveled all over this country, galvanizing teachers. And one time in particular, I remember when we were in the great state of South Carolina, and teachers decided that they wanted to have a day of walkout, and our campaign was right there supporting their efforts to draw attention to the fact that they are not being paid enough. They shared their concerns with me and others on that campaign. So led by Red for Ed, over 10,000 teachers in South Carolina and their supporters marched on the State House. And I remember that day like it was yesterday. I was trying to go through my stuff, y'all, to find some pictures and some videos so I could show you that. But it was really an awesome day to see so many people come together for teachers. And I also want to draw your attention to the Thurgood Marshall Plan for Public Education. That was the name of our plan when we were on the campaign trail in 2020. And part of that plan to combat racial discrimination and school segregation in the unaccountable profit motive of charter schools, provide equitable funding for public schools, give teachers a starting salary of $60,000, expand collective bargaining rights and teacher tenure, and fund out-of-pocket expenses for classroom materials. Many of us have heard the story of how teachers use their own funds to provide supplies for students, especially those teachers who are teaching in predominantly rural and also urban areas. I have many of my friends are teachers, and they tell those stories just up front of how much they love those children they give to them. Another part of the Thurgood Marshall education plan, and again, this was our education plan during the election cycle of 2020. I wanna shout out Dr. Heather Galtney for helping to birth this baby right here. Ensure that the federal government provides at least 50% of the funding for special education and gives special education teachers the support that they need. That was so important because states provide the overwhelming majority of that money, and it has not been increased in a very long time in this country. Provide year-round free universal meals and incentivizes local sourced food. Hello, somebody? Year round, because these babies got to eat year round. And just because school is not in the same conditions that they find themselves in or their families does not change just because they are not in school. So why wouldn't we feed those babies year round and help these families and then incentivize locally sourced food? That is a beautiful thing too. Urban gardening is a beautiful thing. Hello? And then lastly, Thurgood Marshall Plan Part 3, make schools safe and inclusive by protecting the rights of all students from harassment, discrimination, and violence, and enacting comprehensive gun violence prevention laws. Rebuild, modernize, and green our nation's school. I'm gonna tell you something, Jackson. I was proud of a lot of things that we accomplished on the Sanders campaign. Now we worked very hard in South Carolina. We ain't gonna drudge up what happened, because we're talking about the education plan, but let's just say, some of the leadership in South Carolina didn't take kindly to some of the things that we were trying to convince people that they deserved and they could have. But that Thurgood Marshall Plan for education was certainly one of the best policies among all of the policies that we were pushing on the Sanders campaign. So your thoughts, Jackson, on both Senators Sanders and Warren wanting to increase Social Security, and so we covered that. But now Senator Sanders, and I'm sure a lot of co-sponsors are going to sign on to this, taking it all the way into the paint and wanting to increase the funding for schools.
Well,
teachers pay, I should say.
At the end of the day, teachers, or rather the field of teaching, struggling to attract new workers. Is a topic that people have been talking about for quite some time. Liberals, conservatives, everybody talks about this. And you can't get around the fact that good teachers are extremely important to the health and the future of any nation. And so simply paying people more enough to get by, especially if they're like in a 2-person income, but even at that 60,000, you probably likely can get by living single if you live pretty frugally. So that by itself would attract more people to the job, because typically teachers are very passionate about what they do, because it's not a profession that generates a ton of capital. And generally, the people who make the most money generate capital in some type of way, whether they got a whole lot of people watching them, so they make money through ad dollars, or they sell a whole lot of X, Y, and Z. And that never will change, because money is money. But at the end of the day, you can't really complain about having a teacher shortage, but also not be in favor of paying teachers more because it's socialist and we can't go down that road, because, we need teachers. And how else does that impact the future of our workforce? Even if people don't go to college, if they're going to be technicians of some kind, electricians of some kind, or work in some type of labor, like if there's only incentive on generating capital, just because you're making a lot of money don't mean what you're doing is important. You know what I mean?
That's right.
So it's just detrimental to society all the way around to pretend like people aren't dealing with. Actually, earlier today, I was covering a story. I think the average monthly payment on cars is $777 right now. So when you're dealing with stuff like that, people are naturally going to be like, man, I really want to be a teacher, but I can't afford to live off of it. And that is only going to be detrimental to the future of our country.
Yeah, which means it's detrimental to us all, because we are all connected in that way. So big ups to Senators Sanders and Warren et al. In pushing for more money for Social Security, and big ups to Senator Sanders for continuing to push his policy to increase the pay of teachers all over this country.